Well, welcome back. The World Bank cutting its global growth forecast for 2016. The World Bank saying that now it expects the global economy to grow 2.4% this year. That's down from 2.9%. That was their estimate back in January. Two big question marks for business leaders around the world: the presidential election in the U.S. and the upcoming British vote on potentially leaving the Eurozone. We want to bring in Steve Howe, EY, U.S. Chairman and America's Managing Partner. Steve, good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Maria. Great to be here.
Yeah, I mean, you have the ear of C-suites around the world. You speak to lots of managers of businesses globally. How do you see it? Are you surprised that the World Bank is cutting its expectations for economic growth?
No, I'm really not. I mean, it's been tough times. I think the U.S. doing okay, chugging along. It's all relative. The rest of the world, things are not that good. So it's a tough time for business.
But within the U.S., we've been talking about regulation. Is that the main culprit here, or is it something else?
I think the regulatory burden is stifling companies, no question about it. I think the lack of certainty, they need help on tax reform. It's not competitive here. There's a lot of disruption. They're working hard, companies, to just keep moving ahead in this environment.
Steve, your firm, EY, is the expert on tax, and you're in the boardroom almost every week talking to directors and CEOs. What would they like to see on tax going forward?
Well, the big issue is, first of all, the rate is not competitive for U.S. companies, and secondly, the system, worldwide taxation. And so it's a disadvantage. Nothing's going to get done before the election, but hopefully there's a motivation for this to be a big issue in 17.
Because taking it down from 35%, which is the highest in the industrialized world, would really move the needle.
Really would help, and the competition globally in this tough environment is a challenge. And so it's interesting. We're seeing an environment where the economy's kind of weak, yet wages are going up. We're seeing that. And M&A, which usually is better in a strong environment, it's actually pretty strong now because companies are doing whatever it takes to move ahead in transactions.
Acquiring growth.
Yeah.
Bob, so there's been a lot of talk, especially this election cycle, on the middle class and American workers. And we often talk about the regulatory nation on the impact on businesses, but how does the regulation nation affect workers, affects the everyday man and woman?
Well, I think, we heard earlier about small businesses, for example. I know I do a lot of work in that area. Some of the regulations in medical devices and so forth actually flip the profitability because of taxation. If you think about the drive on wages, if you think about health care costs and so forth, a lot of these smaller companies are really being dampened down. And we heard from the governor also about bank lending. We've created this whole, secondary market out there. You can get loans, but you're talking about double-digit interest rates. I think, Steve, you're hearing that a lot in the boardroom also.
Wow.
Yeah, it's tough times. And I would agree, though, entrepreneurs, innovators, they are creating jobs all around the world, but they need some help.
Yeah.
How quickly or how easy is it for a new president, a new White House, to roll back regulations? Because historically, it's like once those rules are solidified, it's very hard to remove them. President Obama in 7 years the White House alone has issued more regulations than in the 8 years of Bush and 8 years of Clinton.
Right.
So,
Wow.
But how quickly can we remove some of those?
I think it's a good question that you shouldn't expect dramatic change, but slowing it down a little bit. I think that's what companies are asking for. It's been a one-way street, heavy burden, the cost of compliance with regulation. Let's just slow it down a little bit and look for other ways for public and private cooperation.
Yeah, and how much would that move the needle in terms of rolling back regulation and tax reform? You get those two things?
Huge.
Huge.
I think huge, because the U.S., I think, as I said, relatively is performing pretty well even with those burdens. I think with a little bit of lift on regulatory and tax reform be huge.
Yeah, we got to get your take on the British vote. June 23rd is the referendum. A lot of back and forth in the polls about potentially the UK leaving the Eurozone. Now there's a report that other countries are also getting tired of the EU as well. If Britain leaves, would that start the domino effect? Isn't that the worry?
Well, first of all, I just think the British issue is huge. And again, this is what we're seeing in this country and all around the world. The electorate is so unpredictable.
Nationalism.
Right now, I would say week to week, it's not clear what's going to happen. But if they exit, I think there are big challenges here. And there's going to be political change, policy change, regulatory change. I think the UK is going to have to think about their trade agreements with European countries, which have not been a challenge for them. And I think these same issues will flow into Europe and potentially other exits. So this is a big deal.
It won't be easy. I think Scotland opened the door.
Right.
Then we have this increased social unrest that's taking place, whether it's in the UK or here. I think there's a good probability that it does pass, and then you're going to see a big domino effect. And it won't be easy to disintermediate and break away, but I think it's a possibility, Steve.
But specifically, everybody who comes on this show last several weeks, I mean, remember Wilbur Ross last week? They're talking about a massive market disruption if this happens, if the UK leaves the EU. Is that what you would see, and why? Why is it such a market disruption, global markets?
Well, you know, I think right now companies need stability. They need certainty. So this would toss everything up in the air. And I think the distraction for companies having to rethink policy, trade agreements, trade flows, tax, you know, and other issues that are going to change here for both the UK and for Europe, it's going to be massive distraction when they really need massive focus to survive in this global economy.
Currency, you know, disintermediating currency. Going back to, you know, local currencies would be a big issue, too.
That's a good point. I keep going back to remembering, though, Britain did not join the euro, and that was actually, they kept the British pound, and that was a good move.
Yeah, they've sort of been, you know, they haven't been the most all-in of the EU members. And you know what? This could flip on something that happens in the news that week, a migrant issue. You know, again, the public, the electorate, very unpredictable.
We'll see about that. June 23rd is the day to watch. Steve, congratulations on your leadership at EY, your most recent award, Diversity and Inclusion.
Oh, thank you, Maria. We're very proud of, you know, we're 220,000 people now around the world. We have to be diverse and inclusive. Very, very proud of that and continue to be focused on it.
Good for you. Steve Howe joining us, EY. We'll see you soon, sir.